the announcements of the ceasefire between Iran and the United States, the ongoing military activity in Lebanon poses a grave risk to the ceasefire and efforts towards a lasting and comprehensive peace in the region. Any intimidation or interference with the mission's activities must stop immediately, and that all must adhere to their obligations to ensure the safety and protection of UN peacekeepers and their facilities. We continue to speak out and condemn the killing of journalists that we see in Gaza and all over the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia Post. Today we're covering a critical and deeply concerning United Nations press briefing from April 10th, 2026. The UN has strongly condemned recent Israeli strikes in Lebanon, warning that they pose a grave risk to the fragile Trump-Iran ceasefire. This is not just another routine briefing. It is a clear international warning that as long as Israel continues its military aggression, any peace process or truce will remain extremely fragile and at risk of collapsing. In this video, we will play the entire 25-minute UN briefing for you, and I will provide analysis on the key points. While mainstream media often leans toward the Israeli narrative, here at the Virginia Post, we believe in speaking truth to power. Civilian lives matter, international law must be respected, and imperialism cannot be justified.
In a short while, I will be joined here by Lee Junhua, who, as you know, is our Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. He will be joined here by Shari Spiegel, Director of Financing for Sustainable Development in DESA. They will brief you on the launch of the 2026 Financing for Sustainable Development report. Then tomorrow, my guest will be Edem Worsornu, the Director of Operations and Advocacy at OCHA. She will be here to brief us on the humanitarian situation in Haiti, which we don't hear about all that much. Today, the Secretary General addressed the Normandy World Peace Forum via video message. He said that at a time when geopolitical upheavals, wars, inequality, and the climate crisis are shaking our world to its core, peace can seem more fragile than ever. This turmoil, he underscored hope is not a refuge but a duty, the duty to defend international law against the law of power, to protect human rights against abuses, and to uphold human dignity against indifference. The Secretary General stressed that peace is not merely the silence of guns. It is built through justice, solidarity, humanitarian access, and trust between peoples. It demands the courage to listen and to compromise. The Secretary General said that Normandy knows the cost of war. It also knows the power of reconciliation and collective commitment, which raised Europe from its ruins and inspired the world. As we face the challenges of our time, he called on all to draw on that memory to find the courage to act for peace. Jean Arnaud, who, as you know, is the Secretary General's personal envoy for the Middle East conflict and its consequences, is in Tehran today. Today he held meetings with senior officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as representatives of the Iranian Red Crescent. And he also visited some of the civilian sites damaged in recent airstrikes. During these engagements, Mr. Arnaud heard views on the way forward and reiterated the Secretary General's firm commitment to making every possible effort to support a peaceful settlement of this conflict. Acting on the Secretary General's instructions, Mr. Arnaud will continue his regional tour with several visits to the Middle East, aimed at supporting the ongoing efforts to achieve a comprehensive and durable resolution to this conflict. Further readouts and information will be provided as we receive them. Turning to Lebanon, I think you all saw the statement we issued late last night, in which the Secretary General unequivocally condemned the massive strikes by Israel across Lebanon on April 8th that resulted in hundreds of civilians being killed and injured, including children, and damage to civilian infrastructure. And as you know, some of these strikes are going on today, and I'll have a bit more of an update as I read on. The Secretary General strongly condemns the loss of civilian lives and is deeply alarmed by the mounting toll on civilians. He extends his deepest condolences to the government and the people of Lebanon and wishes a swift and full recovery to all the injured. Our colleagues on the ground tell us that today is a national day of mourning in Lebanon. Flags on government buildings and UN offices are flying at half-staff. Lebanese authorities are reporting to us that more than 200 people were killed and more than 1,000 injured. This is, of course, overwhelmed hospitals in the biggest wave of Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon since the beginning of this current escalation. Many others are feared to be trapped under rubble as rescuers attempt to reach them. And today we saw air raids on areas in Beirut's southern suburbs. Reports of the destruction of the Kasmieh coastal bridge in southern Lebanon have further isolated areas south of the Litani River. This has restricted people's movements and humanitarian access for at least 106,000 people, and also made more difficult the work of our peacekeepers in the area. This afternoon, a displacement order for the southern suburbs of Beirut were renewed by Israeli authorities and extended to areas that includes a UN office for UNRWA and two Palestinian refugee camps. 13 shelters for internally displaced people that are currently holding about 6,000 people, offices of several national and international NGOs, and the Rafik Hariri International Airport as well. The Rafik Hariri Government Hospital, I apologize, which is the biggest public hospital in the country. The order also covers more than 20 locations used by our humanitarian partners to deliver aid and services to people in need. With the announcements of the ceasefire between Iran and the United States, the ongoing military activity in Lebanon poses a grave risk to the ceasefire and efforts towards a lasting and comprehensive peace in the region. The Secretary General reiterates his call on all parties to observe the ceasefire immediately. There is no military solution to this conflict. As we've been saying, the Secretary General continues to call on all sides to avail themselves of the diplomatic channels and recommit themselves to the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. As the situation continues to deteriorate, we reiterate the need for an immediate de-escalation of hostilities, full respect for international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilian infrastructure, sustained and unimpeded humanitarian access to all those who need it, and urgent funding for our humanitarian operations. Back here this morning, our Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, briefed the troop contributing countries to UNIFIL. He reiterated that any intimidation or interference with the mission's activities must stop immediately and that all must adhere to their obligations to ensure the safety and protection of UN peacekeepers and their facilities. He also reaffirmed that from our point of view, obviously, the safety of our own peacekeepers remains a top priority. Meanwhile, incidents of aggressive behavior towards peacekeepers continued. Yesterday, a UN logistics convoy was blocked by an IDF Merkava tanks in Sector West. The tanks directed their main guns at the peacekeepers and fired machine gun outburst within meters of the convoy. That damaged a UNIFIL vehicle. Thankfully, no injuries were reported, but the convoy was forced to return to base. UNIFIL is adapting its posture to the evolving security environment and strengthening force protection measures. Contingency plans continue to be reviewed and closely watched. Turning to just south to the occupied Palestinian territory and to Gaza, where our colleagues for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that 6 months since the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, the humanitarian scale-up led by us and our partners remains constrained, leaving people in dire conditions. OCHA warns that people across the Gaza Strip are still exposed to lethal force and the risk of casualties, destruction of property, and further displacement, all of which continues to deepen humanitarian needs. For instance, yesterday, OCHA documented the killings of a Palestinian man during a settler attack in the northern West Bank. To put it in context, OCHA tells us since the beginning of 2026, more than 580 settler attacks have resulted in casualties or property damage in over 190 Palestinian communities. These and other attacks are affecting civilians, must be investigated, and civilians must be protected. Israel, as the occupying power, must protect Palestinians. Perpetrators of violence must be held to account according to international humanitarian law. Turning to Yemen, where Hans Grunberg, the Secretary General Special Envoy for Yemen, arrived in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia for talks focused on the impact of the regional escalation on Yemen. His visit to Riyadh follows meetings in Aden with senior government officials, where discussions centered on the implications of recent regional and national developments for peace prospects in Yemen. Discussions also focused on efforts to stabilize the situation in southern governorates and economic priorities. Across all his engagement, Mr. Grunberg stressed the urgent need to shield Yemen from the wider regional tensions and preserve space for Yemeni-led political process under the auspices of the United Nations. And on the humanitarian front, as you can imagine, the crisis is deepening, with needs rising as flooding, displacement, and economic hardship leaves thousands of Yemenis without shelter, without clean water, or the most basic necessities. More than 22 million people, including over 10 million women and girls, need humanitarian assistance. Visits for this year alone. Among them, 5.2 million internally displaced persons, as well as thousands of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers who are currently in Yemen. Aid agencies are stepping up their response amid the crisis. The International Organization for Migration plays a critical role in reaching the most vulnerable, ensuring that migrants and refugees are not left behind. Working with partners, IOM is also investing in longer-term solutions, such as a reminder these efforts can only succeed with sustained international support, and that means cash, among other things. Turning to Sudan, where civilians there continue to bear the brunt of escalating violence. Today, a drone attack struck a wedding ceremony in the Khartoum in North Darfur, killing at least 30 civilians, including women and children. We condemn this and all attacks against civilians. Attacks using drones against civilians and civilian objects are unacceptable. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected in line with international humanitarian law. In South Kordofan, clashes around the town of Dilling since last Monday have reportedly killed 47 civilians and injured dozens more. Aid operations continue to be disrupted, with key supply routes closed, preventing us from prepositioning critical supplies, which includes health, nutrition, and water ahead of the rainy season, which usually begins in June. Fuel prices have surged, deepening already severe humanitarian needs. Once again, we call for an immediate cessation of hostilities, for rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access across all areas of Sudan, and so we can reach all people. And we often tell you about the impact of funding shortages, and I want to talk about what is going on in the Sudan-Chad region. Our colleagues from the World Food Programme and UNHCR are telling us that more than 1 million Sudanese refugees in Chad face immediate and life-threatening cuts in food, in water, in shelter, protection, and health care unless the agencies are able to get additional funding. The combined shortfall for both agencies is $428 million. As we've mentioned many times, the government of Chad has generously kept its borders open to refugees from throughout the Sudan conflict and now hosts 1.3 million refugees from Sudan. Over 900,000 of them have crossed the border since the start of the war in 2023. Chad, as a reminder, is among the least developed countries, 190 out of 193, according to our colleagues at UNDP. They may not have much to spare, but they continue to share what they have with the men, women, and children fleeing the war in Sudan. 1 in 3 people living in the east of Chad is now a refugee. Current resources at UNHCR allows basic assistance for only 4 out of 10 refugees, leaving many with little access to shelter, water, or basic health care. WFP is equally impacted by the lack of funds, with less than half of the resources it needs. The agency reaches over 1 million people in refugee hosting areas with food assistance, but has already been forced to cut its support in half to the majority of refugees. We call on donors to mobilize funding over the next 6 months so we can sustain this life-saving assistance. Chad's continued openness and generosity should be matched by decisive international responsibility and generosity. Our emergency relief coordinator, Tom Fletcher, has allocated $48 million from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund for urgent support to the UN Humanitarian Air Service. Our humanitarian colleagues note that notes that UNHAS, which is operated by the World Food Program, is a lifeline, helping aid workers critical supplies to reach those who need it. But with humanitarian funding shrinking, the air service could be forced to suspend flights. The new funding will keep UNHAS service operating in 8 countries like Chad, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Haiti, Kenya, Nigeria, South Sudan, Sudan, and Syria. This will allow thousands of humanitarian workers from the UN, NGOs, and civil society to do their work. And UNHAS also transports journalists so they can do their work in many instances. The allocation was made possible by the recent contribution of $2 billion to the UN-managed humanitarian funds. And back here, the Security Council held a briefing on the UN Interim Administration mission in Kosovo, better known as UNMIK. Briefing the council members was Peter Dew, the special representative and head of the mission. He noted that he arrived in Kosovo in early January at a moment of optimism that Kosovo could move forward after the political stalemate of 2025. The legislative elections held at the end of December were conducted in a peaceful and inclusive manner, he said. Mr. Dew said that momentum, however, was tested during the process of electing a new president for Kosovo, a process which has yet to be completed. He noted that on 25th March, the Constitutional Court decided that the Assembly still had 34 days to elect a president. Let us hope that the differences can be bridged, he said, stressing that this could help ensure that the institutions remain focused on the broader public interest and people's needs. Also want to read into the record that yesterday the Secretary General appointed Major General Mohammed Assasullah Minzaul Alam of Bangladesh as the new force commander for the UN peacekeeping mission in Cyprus, UNFICYP. The general succeeds Major General Batsuri of Mongolia, to whom the Secretary General expresses his deep appreciation for his dedicated service. And the Major General Alam brings to the position over 30 years of leadership and command experience in the Bangladeshi army. Edith Lederer.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups on Jean Arnaud. Can you tell us who the highest-ranking person he's met with in Iran is? And is he staying in Tehran, or what's his next stop going to be?
He met with the deputy foreign minister today. We expect him to stay a little bit longer in Tehran, but obviously things are shift quite quickly.
And a second question, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just announced that Israel and Lebanon will be holding direct talks. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that?
Yeah, we've seen these reports. We obviously would welcome any direct negotiations between Israel and Lebanon for the sake of both Israelis and Lebanese. And as we've been saying, there is no military solution to this conflict, and we hope the road to diplomacy will be taken. Benny.
On Arnaud, back to that. So you said Deputy Foreign Minister. What's his name, by the way?
I have him somewhere, but
you have it
I'll
somewhere.
get to it, yeah.
Does Arnaud think, or does he know whether the Deputy Foreign Minister, or for that matter, the Foreign Minister himself, actually represents the decision-making group in Iran?
The deputy foreign minister is Majid Takht Ravanchi, for the record. Listen, I spoke to Jean before coming up here. He said he had a substantive meeting, and he hopes to continue his consultations. But I'm not going to get into any more substance of the discussions he's having in Tehran and those he expects to have other places.
Just the assessment. Is he representative of the leadership?
Look, he is Mr. Arnault is meeting senior officials that we've asked to meet with. Stefano, and then Linda.
Two questions. One is about the Strait of Hormuz, that what it looks like that Iran will actually charge a toll. And my question is this legal? Also, because the water is, yes, there is the water is also, there is also Oman water. So what does the UN think about this idea of charging a toll for those ships?
What we want to see in the Strait of Hormuz, as in any other international waterways, is full and unhindered freedom of navigation. That's what international law says.
So it means that UN doesn't like this idea of.
You will analyze what I say for the readers of Voce
And then
New
another
York.
question is instead was a follow-up on the announcement that the Prime Minister Netanyahu will go to Lebanon.
I don't think the announcement is that he's going to Lebanon. I think the announcement said that he had deputized somebody from the government.
Yes,
to
there's
have
going to be
discussions
talk.
with Lebanon. Yeah.
The government of Israel is going to start a talk with the Lebanon government. Do you know if UNIFIL is going to participate somehow, some way in those discussions?
I don't know. I mean, we saw the report broke, I guess, about half an hour ago. So obviously, we'll have to wait and see how this develops. But as I told Edie, we very much welcome this development. Linda. Yep.
Thank you, Steph. Turning to another topic, the North Korea. I was wondering what the SG's reaction has been to there have been a few short-range ballistic missiles that have been launched in the past few days, and was wondering how significant is this situation?
Well, I mean, we stand against all launches of missiles from the DPRK. I think that our position on that is clear and has been unchanging. Farnoosh.
Thanks, Steph. Just to go back to the personal envoy in Tehran, can you disclose any details about the conversations with the Red Crescent? As you know, it's been very difficult for most independent journalists to get numbers of casualties, of the damage to civilian harm in Iran. Wondering if you guys were able to get a better analysis.
I mean, we've seen there was a meeting, and then he was taken to the site of a university that had been destroyed and an apartment block that had been destroyed. I think the Red Crescent has putting out figures in the public domain. We don't have anything different than that.
And then separately, we've reported that China had a major role in bringing Iran on board to this very shaky and fragile ceasefire deal. Wondering what the SG's response is in China being a mediator in this new role that they've taken on.
Look, I think every country that can play a role, can play a positive role in bringing the parties to stop this conflict is very much welcome. I mean, this conflict, while regional in its kinetic nature, has global implications. So I think any country, wherever they are in the world, that can play a positive role should play it, and we welcome that.
Thank you, Stefan. Is Jean Arnault planning to travel to Islamabad to take part in these peace talks that would take place tomorrow? And if not, what's the UN's role in these talks?
Look, I think the issue of the role the UN will play in bringing peace is something that Mr. Arnault is, in fact, discussing, and what constructive role we can play. his travel right now continues to be a moving target. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stefan. I apologize if you raised this issue before. Did you issue any statement on the assassination of the 13th journalist of Al Jazeera in Gaza, Mohammed Wishah, and number 272 Palestinian journalists killed in Gaza since October 2023?
We continue to speak out and condemn the killing of journalists that we see in Gaza and all over the world. Your next question.
But no statement on Mohammed Wishah.
I think I've just answered your question of what our position is on what happened to him.
Okay.
Abu Sufyan.
Thank you, Steph, for joining me. After a long time, direct talks are going to hell between USA and the Iran. 2 weeks ceasefire is in place. The US Vice President is going to Pakistan to discuss the 10-point proposal by Iran. On the other hand, Iranian representative will also participate. Does UN Secretary General have any advice to them?
Well, our advice is, I think as the Secretary General said, this is a time for diplomacy and not destruction. And we hope that all the participants in these negotiations would grab this opportunity to put an end to this conflict.
I have a follow-up.
Yes, sir, please.
How UN Secretary General see the mediator role by Pakistan?